In the quiet stillness of early dawn, when the village was just beginning to wake, a strange sound cut through the morning air, sharp, trembling, and filled with desperation. At first, the villagers thought it was a wounded animal somewhere in the forest, but the cries kept echoing closer, raw and unsettling. Curious and concerned, a small group followed the sound to the edge of a muddy field left waterlogged by the night's heavy storms. And there, half buried in thick mud, shivering violently, was a tiny tiger cub, its fur plastered to its body, its eyes swollen from crying, its voice barely strong enough to call out anymore. For a moment no one moved. This was a tiger, after all, symbol of fear, majesty, and danger. But when the cub lifted its head, weakly reaching out as if begging for someone, anyone, to help, the truth settled heavily in every heart watching. This wasn't a threat. This was a child. The villagers kept a careful distance at first, scanning the tree line, terrified that the mother might leap out at any moment. But the night's floods had been brutal, sweeping through the forest, breaking dens, and scattering animals in every direction. The cub tried to stand, slipping helplessly in the mud, its tiny legs trembling before collapsing again. That single fall broke the last bit of hesitation in the villagers. Compassion drowned out fear. They gathered closer, speaking softly to keep the cub calm, realizing it had likely been separated from its mother during the storm. The mud around him was thick and heavy, clinging to his body like a trap, and every time he cried out the sound grew weaker, as if fading into the wind. The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. None of them had ever been this close to a tiger cub before, but they all understood one thing clearly: if they didn't act now, this little life would disappear forever. And so, with trembling hands and brave hearts, they stepped forward toward the helpless creature, unaware that this single moment of courage would change the cub's destiny in ways none of them could imagine. The mudfield felt eerily silent as the villagers approached the struggling cub, their footsteps sinking softly into the wet earth. The tiny tiger tried to lift its head again, but the weight of the mud clinging to its body dragged it back down. Its breaths came in short, frightened bursts. A few villagers knelt beside it, speaking in gentle whispers as if trying to soothe the child. They laid down wooden boards to prevent sinking and slowly worked together, sliding ropes beneath the cub's fragile body. Every movement had to be careful. Even a wrong tug could hurt him. As they pulled, the mud released its grip inch by inch, until finally the cub was lifted free, trembling violently from exhaustion. The youngest villager wrapped a warm cloth around its tiny frame, and the cub pressed its face into the cloth as though it understood this was safety. They carried him back toward the village, all the while glancing at the forest behind them, half expecting the mother to appear. But the woods remained still. For now, the cub had only them strangers who had become his only hope. Inside the village, the cub was placed near a small fire where warmth seeped into his shivering body. The caretaker, an older man who had tended to injured animals for years, gently cleaned the mud from its fur with warm water. With every wipe, the cub whimpered softly, too weak to resist but trusting enough to let human hands help him. They offered him milk from a bottle, and although he struggled at first, instinct eventually guided him to drink. His breathing steadied, though his frightened eyes kept darting toward the door, searching for something familiar, something that wasn't there. Night fell, and the cub whimpered in his sleep, dreaming of the mother he had lost in the storm. Meanwhile, forest officers arrived, listening carefully as villagers described where they had found him. A team began tracking the forest's edges, looking for prints, broken branches, anything that hinted the mother was still alive. Days passed slowly. The cub grew stronger, standing shakily, taking small steps, even nudging the caretaker's hand with quiet affection. But every evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, he would look out toward the forest and cry a soft, lonely sound that reminded everyone that healing the body was only part of saving him. On the fourth morning, the tracking team returned with promising news. Faint paw prints leading deeper into the forest, belonging to a tigress who appeared restless but alive. The officers prepared the cub for the journey, placing him gently into a secure crate lined with the same cloth he had grown attached to. The villagers followed behind, hope rising in their chests as they walked the narrow forest trail. When they reached a clearing, the officers placed the crate on the ground and stepped back. Moments later, a soft rustle stirred in the trees. A massive tigress emerged thin from the storm, eyes blazing with desperation. She growled at first, warning the humans to stay back, but then she caught a familiar scent. The cub inside the crate let out a small cry, a sound that instantly transformed the tigress's posture from fierce to frantic. She inched closer, sniffing, recognizing the scent she had feared was lost forever. With careful hands, the officers opened the crate. The cub stumbled out, letting out a tiny squeal, and the mother rushed forward, touching him gently with her nose, then licking the mud-stained fur that still clung to him. The villagers watched quietly, filled with relief. They hadn't just saved a cub, they had restored a bond and rewritten a destiny. As the tigress lifted her cub gently into her jaws and disappeared into the shadowed forest, a deep, peaceful silence settled over the clearing. The villagers stood still for a moment, letting the weight of what they'd witnessed sink in a reunion that almost never happened, a life that nearly slipped away. The forest, once shaken by storms and loss, now felt whole again. Slowly, the group turned back toward the village, their hearts lighter than when they arrived. They knew the cub would grow up never remembering their faces, never recognizing the hands that saved him, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that kindness had bridged the ancient distance between humans and the wild, proving once more that compassion carries power far beyond fear. As the villagers walked home under the soft morning light, they carried with them a quiet reminder. Every small act of courage can shape a future, and sometimes even change a destiny forever.